going to hear a talk from Coree Tull on BC watershed security. Um, I see I believe there's a few MLAs in the group. As you can see, the agenda, we're just going to um, have Corey present the talk from 7:10 to around 7:30. Um, and then the ministers or MLAs or any elected officials can introduce themselves, and then we will open the floor for any elected officials to ask questions of Corey. Um, and then after that, we will open the floor to the whole audience. Um, so the goal of SCOEE Hall is just to get forward awareness and education based environmental and economic platform that can help us understand these environmental and economic issues facing British Columbia. Um, so please, if you do ask a question, don't make any direct questions to any elected officials or pleas to government or please or calls to action. We're just here to listen and learn and start these conversations. We're going to put on five of these, five more of these this year. And so this is just information awareness, relationship building. And that's where we're at. And hopefully we will introduce a SCOE debates talks to later on and where we can actually discuss positions and policies at a lower level. But this is pretty high, broad stuff. And so, with that in mind, if we can just remember that we're here to, with like-minded people, just to etiquette forward. So, I think with that, um, I will just hand the talk over to our expert, and I would really, really like to thank our expert Corey Tull and her colleagues Roberta Webster and Oliver Brandes, all elected officials, and the audience at large. We need all three of these aspects for this to work. So thanks for being here tonight, and with no further ado, the floor is yours, Corey Tull.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stuart. Well, hello, everybody. My name's Coree Tull, and I'm really excited to be here tonight. And thank you, Stuart and SCOEE, for inviting me to join you and share a little bit about watershed security in the province. I see some familiar faces, and so it's lovely to see some people that I haven't seen for a while. So yeah, it's going to be a good night. Levi, I'll just get you to put the slides up here for us. And maybe while Levi is getting us set up here. There we go. I just want to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the China Creek Urban Watershed. That's in Vancouver, Kensington, as the writing, but it's on the unceded traditional lands of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Coast Salish people. And I recognize that I'm a guest on these lands, and I'm deeply grateful for the relationships that I've fostered here with the community, the land, and the water. And I encourage each of you to take a moment to reflect on the history and the peoples of the lands where you live, and to consider how you can engage with respect and reciprocity for the ways the land and water nurtures your lives. So I'm really honored to be asked to be here and be considered an expert, but I am a community organizer and I am an advocate and strategist for watersheds in BC. And I wear multiple hats, like many of you, I'm sure, do as well. I chair the BC Watershed Security Coalition. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the BC Water Legacy. And I sit on a variety of different steering committees, from working for watersheds to the Canadian Coalition for Healthy Waters. And so tonight, I'm going to speak to the state of watershed security in BC and the frontline watershed work that's happening in the province, and some of the opportunities for BC to really lead and win on watershed security moving forward right now. So As Stuart mentioned, I have two colleagues that are joining me tonight, Oliver Brandes from the Polis Water Sustainability Project at UVic, and Roberta Webster with the Rivershed Society of BC, who are going to join us and participate in the discussion and Q&A portion at the end. So with that, let's dive into it. So next slide, please, Levi. There we go. So I just wanted to kick us off to talk about what a watershed is. And some of you might think this is silly, but surprisingly, many British Columbians don't know what a watershed is. And so we all live in a watershed. And a watershed is an area of land that drains all the rain or snow into the streams, into a specific body of water. That could be a lake, it could be a river, it could be a reservoir. And because water flows downhill, the highest points of land around a water body, often mountains or hills, are the boundaries of a watershed. And so in BC, we have 9 major watersheds or basins. Many of them are iconic and known globally. We have the Fraser, the Skeena, the Mackenzie. And within these major watersheds are many smaller sub-watersheds. And so, as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm in the China Creek Urban Watershed. And so that's a sub-watershed within the larger Fraser watershed. So what is watershed security and why does it matter? And why do we need to be talking about it and thinking about it? Levi, if we could go to the next slide, please. So watershed security is about access to clean drinking water, a basic human right, but it's also about healthy fish populations, thriving local economies with good jobs that allow people to stay in their communities. It's strong partnerships between governments that enable better decision-making and resilient communities that can withstand the increasing risks of the droughts and wildfires and floods that we're experiencing. It's also about protecting these watersheds that sustain our way of life, whether that's socially, culturally, and economically. Yet the benefits of healthy watersheds are often overlooked, and here's why they matter. Next slide, please. So when we have healthy functioning watersheds, we see climate resiliency in our communities. So our watersheds are our first line of defense against the climate disasters that we're experiencing. They provide us safe, clean drinking water. And without healthy watersheds, drinking water becomes harder to access. It becomes more expensive as communities need to rely on infrastructure and filtration systems. Of course, food security is a big part of that. Every bite of food that we eat depends on water, whether that's crops that we grow or fish from our rivers and our lakes. We also see reduced business risk. So as these water crises continue to increase, threatening jobs and businesses across the province, watershed security reduces those risks to those businesses. Of course, there's job creation and economic growth. Healthy watersheds are directly connected to the strength of our economy. And then community well-being. There's a ton of really amazing research from public health experts that highlight the clear connection between healthy watersheds and then overall mental and physical well-being. And then last is sort of Indigenous rights and reconciliation, which is deeply connected and woven through all of these benefits. Unfortunately, in BC, the reality isn't quite as positive. So next slide, please. And so in the province, the climate crisis is a water crisis. And the past few years have really highlighted the urgent need for watershed security as communities are finding themselves on the front lines as they're facing this ongoing cycle of droughts and wildfires and flooding. And so what this is showing us and what we're seeing firsthand is how decades of watershed degradation, poorly planned development, and land use activities from clear-cut logging to urban expansion are really taking a toll on our watersheds and our communities. And so this is all then being amplified by the changing climate that we're seeing. And so through some of our work, we've been conducting public opinion polling. And one of the things that we have just learned recently is that 68% of British Columbians are concerned about a major water crisis in their community. And this has steadily increased over the past 6 years. And one of the challenges that we're seeing with these crises is that the costs to respond to them are just staggering. And so, in 2021, we saw the heat dome, we saw wildfires, and then floods. And the price tag is well over, $15 billion. And then we saw another, $2 billion in lost wages from those crises. And then again in 2023, where we had BC's worst drought ever, and then fire season, which saw another $1 billion that was spent on wildfire response. And so local governments, nations, communities, they're in this crisis mode, and they're lacking the resources and bandwidth for this proactive, preventative planning that's needed to get ahead. The good news on this, though, is that the province has already taken some important initial steps on this path, and many of the tools that are needed already exist. Next slide, please. So in 2021 and 2022, the BC government invested $57 million in watershed security through the Healthy Watersheds Initiative and the Indigenous Watersheds Initiative. And these were originally an economic recovery program during COVID-19. And this really proved to be a major job creator in the province. And it supported over 100 projects and created over 1,800 frontline watershed jobs that were improving climate resiliency, public safety, food security, and salmon restoration. And then this built some really critical momentum in the province around the watershed sector and around watershed security. And then in 2023, BC took another really important step by creating the Watershed Security Fund. And that was with an initial $100 million endowment. And I just want to point out, this is really important because this endowment provides funding for long-term investments into the future. And this fund is co-developed with First Nations. The challenge is that $100 million endowment only generates $3 to $5 million annually, which falls, short of what is needed across the province to build sort of the resilient communities that are needed in the face of climate change. I will just interject here, though, to say that I saw Finn Donnelly on the line, and I'd be remiss to not acknowledge the dedication and the hard work that Finn did while elected to really advance and champion many of these investments in the province. So when we are hearing the Premier talk about using public funds wisely, this is, the Watershed Security Fund and the investments that we've seen in watershed security are exactly the kind of initiatives and investments that we need to be seeing. They're relevant, they're efficient, and they're essential for both the economy and the environment. Next slide, please. So I want to just share a quick snapshot of some of the types of watershed projects that we've been seeing across the province and the types of projects that have been invested in and have been supporting some amazing community work. I've been really fortunate to visit many of these projects, and the impact that we're seeing in communities is absolutely remarkable. And so the first one is the Cowichan Watershed Board, which has been around for quite a while, but the Healthy Watersheds Initiative and others were really important in continuing to support that work. And the Cowichan Watershed Board has really proven how, collaborative, community-driven water management works. And the board, it's chaired by Cowichan tribes in the regional district, and it has local experts that are a part of that. And the board has helped to really prevent conflicts during times of water stress. They've strengthened local decision-making, and it's advancing more collaborative watershed management priorities and strategies for the region, while really ensuring that local people feel included and empowered through that process. The second is the Riversheds Foodland program, which has transformed degraded riparian areas along the Salmon River into this really thriving ecological corridor. And so in collaboration with local nations, landholders, they've restored ecologically and cultural significant areas, and they've provided really critical habitat for coho salmon and increased biodiversity for aquatic, avian, and terrestrial species. And one of the really neat things about this project is that it's grounded in traditional knowledge. And so the project has been able to create local employment and strengthen community ties while fostering this cultural renewal that has been serving as a model for the project. And so the Kwantlen and Katzie Knowledge keepers and language learners have really guided these restoration efforts by integrating Halkomenum names and prioritizing culturally significant plants and animals used for spiritual, nutritional, and medicinal purposes. The third one is the Columbia Basin Water Monitoring Hub. And so what we know is that better data leads to better decisions. And this has really been made clear through the work of that hub. And this hub is closing data gaps around the province. And they're expanding groundwater monitoring by over 400% in under monitored watersheds. And they're providing some really essential data to support smarter planning for wildfire suppression, agriculture, tourism, forestry, and local water management. And this is supporting, governments, nations, and businesses in their water budgets that they're working on. And one of the really neat things is that through the hub, there was this Water Resources for Wildfire Suppression project that was between Living Lakes Canada and the Argenta Safety and Preparedness Society. And off of the water monitoring that they did, they were able to help firefighters quickly locate water sources while actively out in the field fighting the Argenta wildfire in the summer of 2024, which helped them to improve crisis response and make better decisions in the moment to minimize impact to local communities and people. And then the final one is the Peach Creek Hoogie Wetland Restoration Project, which is near Chilliwack, and it has been led by the Fraser Valley Watershed Coalition. And its work is, the work that they're doing is to safely rewater the Vedder River floodplain to support, restore, and enhance salmon and aquatic fish habitat. And this restoration work is happening between some of the dikes to create salmon spawning habitat. And one of the really neat things that we saw, one of the few neat things during the 2021 atmospheric rivers was that when that catastrophic flooding was happening in the Fraser Valley, this project had two really key benefits. It allowed salmon to continue to spawn in off-channel habitats, so it could escape that really high, fast water flows. And then the restored wetlands were able to soak up that extra water and minimize additional flooding in that area. So some really powerful benefits and impacts. And this is obviously just 4 projects of hundreds around the province. Next slide, please. So watershed security, it's about the action we take to ensure our watersheds, continue to provide those valuable benefits. And so through the work that I'm fortunate to do with many amazing partners across the province, we really believe that there are 4 key opportunities for BC to lead and win on watershed security right now. And that's growing the sector, advancing DRIPA and UNDRIP, investing in a water secure future, and then building a system of local watershed boards. Next slide, please. So when we talk about watershed security, many people think of it as, an environmental issue, but the reality is that healthy watersheds are a foundation for BC's economy. And growing the economy, public safety, affordable housing, improved health outcomes, and advancing DRIPA are all really central themes that we saw in mandate letters. Watershed security was not, but it's really critical to achieving each of these priorities. And so, whether we have farmers that are growing food or craft breweries or tourism operators, or even the natural resource sector, every single one of these industries depends on clean, reliable water. And so in 2021, the Working for Watersheds initiative was launched. And what this work did was it brought together industry, government, and Indigenous communities and conservation organizations to really understand the full economic impact of the watershed sector. And so through research and engagement, we've been able to clearly define this sector as a critical economic engine in the province. And one that not only protects water, but also supports BC's biggest industries and local businesses. And so what we found was that what often gets overlooked is that the work to protect and restore BC's watersheds, such as restoration, monitoring, technology, urban and industrial management, is a massive economic sector in its own right. And it supports over 47,000 direct and indirect jobs. It generates over 5 billion annually in GDP. And this is more jobs and GDP than agriculture in the province. And it's like on par with the mining industry. And so the work to advance watershed security in the province, it's not just about conservation, it's about good jobs, strong local economies, and long-term economic stability in every corner of BC and in between. And so it's proving to be a really important career path also for resource workers that are looking to transition into new opportunities in their predominantly in rural communities. Next slide, please. So at the end of 2023, the Working for Watersheds launched this Water Innovation Dialogue Series. And so it brought together over 100 local leaders, First Nations, industry representatives, and conservation groups to really tackle a key question around how do we grow this sector over the next 10 years? And so there were some really valuable insights that helped us to shape this sector roadmap and develop a strategic vision that outlines, 5 key action areas that can strengthen and expand the watershed economy in the province. And so this, and the goal was that this isn't about responding to challenges, but really about how do we seize this economic opportunity and the benefits to our communities and our businesses and the environment across the province. And so, we find ourselves at a real turning point in the province, and watershed security is a really smart economic strategy for us to take. And so the groundwork has really been laid through the investments to date and through a bunch of the research and work that community is leading. And there's an opportunity for growth right now that's in front of us. And so it's time for us to really recognize watershed security as a core economic priority for BC's future. Next slide, please. So, advancing UNDRIP and DRIPA with watershed security is one of the next kind of key opportunities that we see. And watershed security really plays a vital role in supporting in and upholding Indigenous rights and recognizing, that First Nations have been stewards of these lands and water since time immemorial. So when we strengthen watershed security, we support Indigenous self-determination and reconciliation, by advancing UNDRIP and DRIPA commitments in a really tangible way. And we can see that, whether that's through restoring watersheds as redress or protecting access to traditional medicines, Indigenous-led stewardship and governance, as well as economic and job creation opportunities, along with, collaborative watershed planning that goes beyond colonial borders. So watershed security is really creating opportunities for Indigenous leadership that ensures we have a healthier, more just future for BC. So the third opportunity is around investing in BC's water secure future. And so since 2019, and let's be honest, before that as well, but in a very coordinated way since 2019, there has been really broad support for sustainable investment in BC's freshwater. And we, from First Nations Leadership Council to local governments with UBCM resolutions to multiple years of provincial budget recommendations, experts have estimated that $50 to $100 million annually is what's needed to sustain watershed security in the province. And knowing that this sort of investment in watershed security could save us billions of dollars in disaster recovery. The current reality, though, right now is that, provincially funded watershed security is dropping, and it has dropped by about 80%, while the demand for frontline watershed work continues to rise. And so, my understanding is that the Watershed Security Fund has received over $75 million in project applications alone, which far exceeds the available funding. And so this funding gap puts jobs predominantly in rural communities at risk, and essentially threaten some of that essential work that's being done to build that climate resiliency and drive economic advancements in local communities. But there's a really clear and fair solution, and that's increasing industrial water fees and reinvesting those back into watershed security. So right now, industries like fracking and mining and water bottling pay just over $5 per million liters of water that they use. So that's for every Olympic-sized swimming pool. And so right now, BC currently collects only about $3 million from industrial water users annually. And so just to be clear, this industrial water users doesn't include municipalities, it doesn't include hydro, it doesn't include agricultural producers. But one of the interesting things is that Quebec was collecting a really similar amount to BC for their industrial water users, but they acknowledged that they essentially were giving their water away for free. And so in 2024, they raised their industrial water royalties from $2.50 to $35 per a million liters, and that's like an increase of over 1,300%. And now Quebec is generating an additional 30 million annually, and they're dedicating that to a blue fund, which you could say is comparable to the Watershed Security Fund in BC. And this was done without industry pushback. So the BC, and one of the awesome things about this is that the BC public supports it. 82% of British Columbians want to see industry pay higher fees, and then with a majority of that, the majority of British Columbians wanting to see those funds reinvested in a scaled up watershed security fund. And so the last opportunity is around a system of local watershed boards. So right now, decisions about BC's watersheds are often fragmented and can be managed in silos. Although the creation of the new Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship definitely is helping this a lot. But one of the important things we know is that watershed decisions need to be made like at the right scale by the people who know their watersheds best, and a system of local watershed boards would change that. And so these are unlike informal stakeholder tables. Watershed boards operate with a really clear mandate from authority holders, whether they're nations, local governments, or the province, that give them the legitimacy, the resources, and the long-term stability to be able to solve water challenges in their communities collaboratively. And so there's a real opportunity here. BC is one of the few provinces without local watershed governance system, but this could change, and BC is really well positioned. The accord with the BC Green Caucus, alongside the mandates that we saw for water, land, and resource stewardship, position the province really well to create a system of watershed boards, which is fantastic. And the public are really excited about this too. 74% of British Columbians support local watershed boards. And one of the things is that there's some really great examples already in BC that we can learn and we can build from. And so what we know and what we've seen from some of these pilots and some of these examples in the province is that watershed boards can provide 4 really key benefits to communities. And the first is targeted action. So watershed boards can take a really proactive, coordinated approach to solve water issues at the source. They can provide a really important community voice. And so these boards build trust, they reduce conflict, and they bring people together around a shared vision. And we saw this back in 2023 during the droughts that summer, where we saw conflict in Westwold that erupted over water for food versus water for fish. And, this caused some really deep community and political polarization. And in the contrast, though, in the Cowichan, who had a similar protection order put in place around their water, avoided similar conflicts. And a big part of that was because of that collaborative approach between the nation, the regional district, community leaders, and the agriculture community. And the next one is reconciliation. And so, watershed boards really allow communities to embed Indigenous leadership and advance shared governance, which puts reconciliation into practice at the local level. And then the last is around these watershed boards being like really strong local economic engines, because these boards are able to leverage investments, create jobs, and attract sort of external funding, while delivering sort of better watershed outcomes at a fraction of the cost. And so, by establishing a system of watershed boards, we can really harness that local expertise, and we can empower communities and create lasting solutions for watershed security in the province. So there's a really important moment and opportunity right now. And so with that, I will leave you with this, which is that watershed security. Oh, just there we go. So I'll leave you with this. Next slide, please, Levi. Watershed security is about the health, safety, and prosperity of every community in BC. And the challenges we face are only growing. But so far, our ability the challenges we face are only growing, but so is our ability to respond to these challenges. And so across the province, we're seeing nations and local governments and communities who are really leading the way, and they're restoring their watersheds and they're strengthening resilience. And they're proving that, when we prioritize watershed security, we can create safer, more secure futures for everyone. And so there's solutions out there that we know work. And so I have to ask the question, will we seize the moment, and can we choose to lead and prioritize watershed security so BC can be, really set the standard for water and watershed security in Canada. So thank you. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you listening. And before I hand it back to Stuart, I just want to officially introduce my colleagues who are going to join me for this next portion to answer questions. And so, as I mentioned, Roberta Webster is the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Government Relations for the Rivershed Society of BC. And she's also on the steering committee for the BC Watershed Security Coalition. And then we're very lucky to have Oliver Brandes with us. And Oliver is the co-director of the Polis Project on Ecological Governance based at UVic, Center for Global Studies. And he leads both the Water Sustainability and the Wildfire Resilience Project. He's an adjunct professor at UVic Faculty of Law and School of Public Administration, and is a fellow of the Environmental Law Center. And most recently, he is the new member of the International Joint Commission Study Board for the International Elk Kootenay Watershed Pollution study. So I welcome them to join me as part of this Q&A, and I just want to thank you all for listening, and I look forward to more of a discussion.